everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Gregory Brew, senior analyst with Eurasia Group. Gregory, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me back, Brittany.
There have been many comments this week, largely from President Donald Trump, about Gaza, about the Palestinian people, that I would love to get your reaction on, and if you could break them down for us. So earlier this... Great, thank you. So earlier this week, the president said that the United States could, quote, take over and develop Gaza. And this comes after he said that Palestinians should be resettled in other neighboring countries like Jordan and like Egypt. And Gaza is, he said, a demolition site. What do you make of all of his commentary?
So we should, start by acknowledging that this is a fairly radical proposal from President Trump. It really came out of left field. I don't think anyone was really anticipating it as part of his, policy proposal for how to address the situation in Gaza. But the president has now made a number of comments. His comments over the last week, his comments during the press conference with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and his subsequent posts to social media. And I think it all suggests that he is pushing this idea fairly seriously. Now, what the president appears to be proposing is moving the population of Gaza outside of the territory so that reconstruction, rehabilitation of the territory can commence after the last 15 months of war. The territory is obviously in a significant state of devastation. Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, acknowledged following his trip to Gaza that most buildings had been reduced to rubble, that there were thousands of unexploded ordnances. So some of the rhetoric from Trump and other members of his administration are coming from the point of view that a temporary displacement is necessary so that reconstruction can commence. But the president also seems to be implying that the Palestinians being moved out of Gaza are going to be moved out permanently. And this is what is raising alarms across the region and internationally. Major Arab governments have issued multiple statements rejecting this proposal. The Palestinian Authority in the West Bank is also joined in condemning the idea of displacing Gazans from the territory. There is a general and very significant pushback to this proposal, this idea that Gazans should be forced out of the territory. The one place where this is being greeted favorably is Israel. The Israeli government of Netanyahu supports this idea, is supporting the idea of moving people out of the territory. Elements of Israel's far right who anticipate being able to potentially colonize the territory are obviously very excited about this, but it's causing an enormous amount of controversy and pushback, and it's still a little bit unclear precisely how the president imagines that this proposal will be enacted if it does in fact move forward.
I want to read a full post from the president. He posted this on Truth Social this morning, and it seems to flesh out what his plan was, because his plan seemingly and reportedly blindsided Netanyahu. You could see when he was talking about Gazans, his chief of staff had a visibly surprised face. She was caught on camera, eyes gaping wide. And so I'll read his full post on Truth. Quote, the Gaza Strip would be turned over to the United States by Israel at the conclusion of fighting. The Palestinians, people like Chuck Schumer, would have already been resettled in far safer and more beautiful communities with new and modern homes in the region. They would actually have a chance to be happy, safe, and free. The U.S., working with great development teams from all over the world, would slowly and carefully begin the construction of what would become one of the greatest and most spectacular developments of its kind on Earth. No soldiers by the U.S. would be needed. Stability for the region would reign. What do you make of this plan? I mean, how realistic would this be? Because you're saying, it seems like he's gaining steam from his own plan that really shocked the world.
Exactly. What was interesting about this post that he issued is that it pushes back against some elements of his original comments, particularly the idea that U.S. troops would be deployed in Gaza. Some of his comments when he was present with Prime Minister Netanyahu seemed to imply that the U.S. was going to occupy Gaza, that U.S. troops were going to be used to secure the territory and oversee this reconstruction, and also that U.S. money would be spent to fund that reconstruction. The president is now trying to clarify that position. He seems to imagine that once the fighting is over, that the U.S. will move the population out and will oversee the development, and I think he's thinking about it largely in real estate terms, the development of the territory into something new that will be funded through alternative means that won't require the deployment of U.S. troops. Now, some of this is sort of feeding into the pushback that he was getting from members of his own party. Individuals such as Senator Lindsey Graham pushed back on this idea that U.S. forces should be sent to Gaza. So I don't think the president is proposing that. But he is proposing that the population of Gaza be moved. And he's proposing that this is necessary for reconstruction of the territory. And this, I think, is the crucial element here. This is really what's going to be driving the discourse around this issue. If the president believes that this is what needs to happen, it's going to trigger a pretty significant reaction, not only from elements of the U.S. domestic political scene, but from the regional governments as well.
Let's talk about that, because as you noted, the only country that seemed okay with that idea was Israel. Even our allies have pushed back on moving Palestinians elsewhere and not allowing them to return to Gaza. This has been compared to ethnic cleansing. Talk to us a little bit about that move.
Well, the comparison, is a fraught one, but the idea of displacing populations from territories so that they can then be resettled or reconstructed, it does fit with instances that we've seen from history. And that does seem to be what the president is getting at, particularly if he says that this displacement is going to be permanent, that Gazans are going to be moved to a new location where he says they can live in peace and security. This raises the question of who is going to live in Gaza after the displacement of this population. And that is really what the regional opinion, the regional situation, that's what they're pushing back against. And here we have to acknowledge that other nations are in a very, very tough spot. First, you have Egypt and Jordan, Israel's neighbors, that were originally picked by Trump as the locations where this population will be moved to. Both Jordan and Egypt are pushing back very, very hard because the idea of accepting millions of Palestinians is not an attractive one. President al-Sisi in Egypt would worry about the security problems that would pose, the pressure that it would put on Egypt's very fragile economy. King Abdullah in Jordan is already trying to hold together a somewhat unstable political situation there. The injection of thousands of Palestinians would push the situation in Jordan into a crisis. Then you have governments such as Saudi Arabia, which, of course, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has been flirting with the idea of normalizing relations with Israel, but has made it very clear that that normalization is contingent on the advancement of a Palestinian state. Displacing Palestinians from Gaza is going in the opposite direction. It's not embracing the idea of a Palestinian state. It's suggesting that it's not viable. So this is where some of these reactions are coming from. And it's also, it gets to the question of what exactly President Trump is trying to get at here. Is he seriously proposing this as a solution to Gaza? Or is this part of a negotiating strategy of attempting to pull Saudi Arabia away from its position? Because we have to remember, one of Trump's major priorities in the Middle East is a Saudi-Israel deal, is Saudi normalization with Israel, and the situation in Gaza is critical to that.
It doesn't seem like there is much domestic and international appetite for Donald Trump's plan. Even Republican lawmakers who are staunch supporters of Donald Trump have been pushing back on this notion of getting American involvement in Gaza. What is this going to do? What is this even proposal, this floated idea, going to do with our relationships with other countries in the Middle East?
Well, as I mentioned, it's going to put them under a lot of pressure. Egypt and Jordan are both major recipients of U.S. aid, and it's possible that Trump may attempt to use that aid as leverage to force them into a situation where they accept Palestinians from Gaza. The U.S. relationship with Saudi Arabia and other states in the Gulf is also going to come under pressure, is going to come under stress, if it becomes clear that Trump sees this as the only solution to addressing the situation in Gaza. Internationally, I think this adds to the body of evidence we have that President Trump in his second term is going to be a little bit more unrestrained than he was in his first administration. He's clearly choosing to do what he wants to do. He's pushing the policy proposals that he believes in, whether it's a tariff war with Canada or whether it's displacing Palestinians from Gaza. So it just suggests that the United States under President Trump is going to be acting in a more unpredictable fashion than we've seen certainly under President Biden, but also under President Trump during his first term in office.
I think brash would be putting it politely of what he was saying, his plan to take over Gaza. And it seems like some Republicans were working a little overtime to clean up those comments. House Speaker Mike Johnson said this, quote, "If you leave Gaza in its current form, there's always a risk of another October 7th. There's always a risk of proxies of Iran, all these terrorist organizations whose openly stated goal is to eliminate Israel as a state." What's the impact, do you think, that Gaza being left, as Johnson said, in its current form, or if the United States takes over Gaza, what impact does that have on terrorism worldwide and in the Middle East?
Well, there's the argument to be made that the U.S. pushing this idea that Gazans need to leave the territory in order for the situation to be resolved. This feeds into propaganda put out by groups like Hamas. Hamas, which is still very present in Gaza, which has survived a 15-month war with Israel. Hamas is drawing a certain degree of strength from this U.S. position because it feeds into their idea that only they can, protect and guide and lead the Palestinian people against Israel and against the United States. It should be noted that, Hamas is still very present in Gaza. That part of the problem here is that nobody really has a clear idea of what kind of solution is viable to ensure peace in Gaza, while also addressing the fact that Hamas remains present. And this also gets to, an element of President Trump's post on social media, that he suggested that moving the population, developing the territory, finding a viable solution was something that would be possible once the fighting ended. And we are, of course, in the middle of a ceasefire right now that may or may not last through the next few weeks. If President Trump foresees fighting to resume, that suggests that maybe he imagines that this will only be possible once Hamas has been completely eradicated from the territory. But I think pushing proposals for pushing Palestinians out of Gaza only feeds into some of the ideas and some of the ideologies that groups like Hamas have been using to draw strength.
I think that's a really interesting point. I think that's one that's missing from this conversation here is how would Trump get Hamas out of Gaza? And so is he essentially admitting in this then that phase 2, phase 3 of those negotiations, there's not going to be a permanent ceasefire? Israel and Hamas are going to keep fighting. Is that what he's suggesting?
I think it's being hinted at, Brittany, and I think it gets to a question which nobody really seems to have the answer to, which is how do you get a permanent ceasefire without eliminating Hamas, which is what the war was meant to do and which the war failed to do. What Trump is laying out is, it's obviously a non-starter for nations such as Egypt and Jordan and Saudi Arabia, but it also elides one of the significant obstacles to peace, which is Hamas being in Gaza and forming a new post-war governance situation that acknowledges that fact. Until the president or another member of his administration or another regional actor comes up with a solution to that problem, then it's going to persist. And we could very well see a breakdown in the ceasefire, possibly by the end of this first phase, and I think very likely into phase 2.
I think that brings up my next point is, what is phase 2 looking like now in this ceasefire hostage negotiation deal?
Well, discussions to commence to reach phase 2 have begun this week. They began during Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit to the United States. They've been continued through discussions with Steve Witkoff, President Trump's Middle East envoy. We don't really have a sense of what kind of progress is being achieved. Hopefully the hostage releases continue according to the predetermined schedule. But phase 2 is meant to not only produce a continued ceasefire and a continued hostage release, but also it's supposed to create a permanent ceasefire, which, as I mentioned, is quite difficult for all actors involved to accept. Israel doesn't want to accept a permanent ceasefire so long as Hamas is present in the territory. I find it hard to believe that the Trump administration would accept a permanent ceasefire with Hamas still in place, particularly if the president's idea is to move the population out of the territory, something that Hamas is certain to reject and resist as much as it possibly can. So until these issues have been resolved, or until positions change, it's looking likely that a ceasefire, while it may reach a phase 2, may not last much longer. It will be in the interests of actors, particularly Israel, to resume the fighting and attempt to complete the elimination of Hamas totally from the territory.
This has really come to a complete surprise, Trump's comments on taking over Gaza. You and I have had a lot of conversations over the past year about the Middle East. Never would I have thought we would be talking about this today, or really at all. So I know it's hard to imagine, what's going to be said in the next day, month, week, year, but what are you looking out for next?
Well, if the president is serious, and I think we have evidence to suggest that he is, the next crucial signpost that I would look at is what kind of pressure is he going to bring against Egypt? Egypt, I think, is the key here. It's really the only state in a position to take large numbers of Palestinian refugees. The Egyptian government has pushed back very hard and repeatedly against the idea of taking Palestinians from Gaza. So if President Trump is serious, he's likely to look to the U.S.-Egyptian relationship and start using the U.S. leverage that it has over Cairo in order to make this deal more possible. I would also look at the continued development in the U.S., Israel, Saudi trilateral negotiations towards some kind of grand bargain. There was, of course, a lot of pressure around that under the Biden administration. The situation in Gaza has emerged as the crucial obstacle to that. And if the president continues to push these proposals, that could put quite a lot of pressure, create quite a lot of friction, and make Israeli-Saudi normalization even harder to pull off this year.
Greg, I really always appreciate your expertise. I appreciate our conversations. I can honestly say I don't know what the next one is going to be, but I appreciate you navigating us through this really turbulent time. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Brittany.